Good afternoon, everybody. Today is Friday, December 16th, 2022. It's 3 o'clock. This is the Town of Dewey Beach monthly Town Commissioner meeting being held at Dewey Beach Life Saving Station as well streaming via Zoom. With that, I'd like to convene the Town Commissioner meeting. I'm going to ask for a motion for an adoption of the agenda, but before I would do that, I'd ask that we amend number 7. After conversation with council, there will be no vote on the relocation of the existing 5 people. It'll be more of an update. This is where we are. So with that, can I have a motion to adopt the agenda?
Motion. Second.
Second by all in favor? Aye. It's unanimous. All right, for opening ceremonies, please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
One nation, under God, indivisible.
It wasn't blaring over the speaker that time.
Next item is roll call. Commissioner Jasinski.
I'm present.
Commissioner Persinger.
Here.
Commissioner Gibbons.
Here.
Commissioner Bauer.
Here.
And Commissioner Mayor Bill Stevens is here. We also have council, Fred Townsend, as well as Lieutenant Hawker and Town Manager Bill Zolper up here. Public comment, if you notice on what we've asked is that we're going to change a little bit of the format. We will allow for public comment for each of the agenda items as we roll forward to make it a little bit more efficient. But if anybody has any general public comments that they would like to make that doesn't apply to any of the 7 items on the agenda, now's the time to vote.
Just question, just to clarify, is the public comment going to be at the beginning of the agenda item or before we vote, or how are you going to do that?
Whatever you think is best.
Well, if it's a vote item, it should probably be before we vote.
Before we vote, but after a presentation potentially about it.
Yeah.
So, okay, fair enough. All right. Kate, anybody in the waiting room? Okay. With that, we'll move on for updates, announcements. Town Manager.
Yeah, thanks, Mayor. So real quick, beach replenishment from DNREC, the latest is it will start sometime between January and February, possibly as late as March, and it should be done by the end of June. Nothing is in stone yet. In Dewey Beach, it'll on Street. Those are the streets they determined based on a survey done by the Army Corps of Engineers.
Will they know? Do we know if they're going to be moving north or south as part of the process?
We don't know that
Okay.
yet. Attended several different workshops with Sea Grant, DNREC in the center of the Inland Bays. I'm sure Commissioner Persinger will provide more information on that. Dave Davies did a nice job. Menorah lighting is the 18th at 5 o'clock down on the Baywalk at the Lighthouse. We closed the clerk's posting position, and we will do interview holidays for that. Met with Remington and Bird, discussed Reed Street, the major flooding down there this morning, the pump station phase 1 and phase 2 of the stormwater pipe evaluations. Those are the projects that I've talked to the infrastructure committee about where we should be looking for the next year and a half. The town will be reposting the beach concession contract bid. We did review one vendor and felt that it just didn't meet the responsibilities of the contract, what was in the contract based on a number of different items, including experience, equipment, and trash removal. So we will be rebidding that. I would ask that the commissioners in January make sure that we have on the agenda that the hotel tax will go up to 2.5. We need to let the hotels know as soon as possible that that's going to happen if it happens, so they can start letting folks know when they're making their reservations. We are continuing to improve and address the IT security concerns, and we will be looking at new policies for onboarding and offboarding as our employees come and go from the town. I've asked the lieutenant and Tammy Horn from parking, and Todd Fritchman all to start looking at the seasonal employment now, to start putting those applications out there, start recruiting at this point. So that will be happening hopefully in the next couple of weeks. We did deliver a $250 donation to the Rehoboth Fire Company in the name of Danny Mitchell. Thank you so much for that. Thank the Dewey Beach Civic League for their donation to purchase a dog chip scanner. We do have that now at Town Hall, so I'd like to thank the Civic League for that. And a really big goal for the town was to get us in part of the Sussex County Hazard Mitigation Program. We are now part of that. There's a letter from FEMA that needs to be sent to the county, but we are in that program now. And then in January, we will be presenting a resolution for you to vote on to also approve that we are in that program. So that's a huge step for us. We haven't been in the program before. Dawn has done a great job working on that, and it took a long period to get that done, and it's going to continue, but she's done a great job. And the last thing, there was an accident last night. One of our brand new light poles in the North End got, and also one of our crosswalk signs got knocked down. Del Dot's going to take care of the crosswalk sign for us, and I'm talking to a contractor now about the street light pole that was knocked down. Pending any questions, that's all I have.
Questions, commissioners? Okay. Thank you, Bill. Next item on the agenda, committee reports. Climate change.
Yeah, the Climate Change Committee last week held a workshop here, and we had representatives from the Resilient and Sustainable Communities League. There were 3 people here. One was from DENREC, one was from Center for Inland Bays, and the third speaker, I'm having trouble remembering where she. Sea Grant, the Sea Grant
yes.
program at, is that University of Delaware?
It's associated with the University.
Yeah, okay. A lot of good content, a lot of good kind of baseline information on what kinds of challenges we face from climate change, and obviously stormwater issues are a continuing problem here in town. What I had hoped, and I haven't been able to follow through on this yet, what I had hoped is that we can try to draw a little more attention to that. There were some good slides I think that everybody should be aware of and exposed to. And I think we ought to be able to pull a few key points and get an email out to our general email population list, so we can begin to draw people's attention to this thing. It's a matter of education, I think, at this point, so that people begin to understand what sea level rise may mean for us, and what a 1 foot rise in sea level could mean for the town, for the lower section of town, which is all in a flood zone of one type or another. And I think if we begin to do that and begin to draw some attention to it, people will begin to raise awareness of how important a problem this is. And then we can begin to work on some strategies for being able to mitigate some of the challenges that we face. So I'm going to send some bullet points to the town manager, and hopefully they can work those into an email that we can get out and point everybody toward the slides that were part of the presentation this week. It really was a very good program. Wish we could have had a little bit better attendance. I don't know how much pickup we got online, but hopefully we got some there as well.
All the slides have been posted on the town website.
Okay, they are. Okay, I hadn't seen that.
Thank you, Gary. Audit,
Nothing to report.
budget.
Nothing to report at this point, but our next meeting is January 23rd at 3 o'clock.
Charter and code,
Nothing to report.
comprehensive development,
Nothing there either.
infrastructure.
Nothing.
Okay. Investment.
Next meeting is January 12th.
Okay. Marketing
Nothing scheduled yet.
and planning and zoning. I guess nothing. I don't know why it's on there. All right. With that, to have a motion for the approval of the November 18, 2022 monthly town commission meeting minutes.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
First item on the agenda, discuss and possibly vote to refer to the Planning and Zoning Commission an ordinance to amend Article 3, Section 1, 6-16 of the municipal code of the town of Dewey Beach to define a tent. First, we posted the documents, the ordinance. Is there anyone from the public that would like to make a comment? Sure.
I'm Steve Spence, and I'm an attorney that has been advocating some additions to the code about this subject on behalf of Highway 1 Limited Partnership and its affiliates. And I was just curious as to whether the proposed definition of tent was taken from some other source, because it seems like a good one, but a good definition. I was just curious where it came from. Any other questions or suggestions for changes? I was just curious. Thank you.
I think Dawn knows where it came from. There's certainly no effort to to hide the origin of that definition.
Oh, I was just curious.
Right, right.
The fire marshal.
Dawn Haynes, building official. That particular was done by Jim Dides, our assistant town manager. It was based on some of the recommendations from the state fire marshal. Since it appears that there throughout the municipalities local, there's no tent definition anywhere. So this was something just created with the information that we had received from the state fire marshal and the fire codes. And then
Recording in progress.
the presentable.
Jim, you
And
got
he's-
2 lines on, Jim Dedes.
Thank you, Dawn.
Hopefully that. He can
Thank you,
explain
Dawn.
more.
All right, well, I will open it up to the commissioners for any conversation before asking for a motion.
I think it's wise to send it to P and Z and get rolling.
Commissioner Persinger?
Yeah, I think that I would agree. I think we want to send this to P and Z as well as send the second part of this, the second agenda item to P and Z as well. There's just some questions that came up for me as I went through this, and some of these I think were actually mentioned at our last meeting by Dawn, our building official. And I sent an email to the town manager and a couple of other folks earlier this week about this. If you look at some of the definitions that are already in our code, there's a reference to tents already included in the definition of structure. And it would seem also that that same definition of structure would also encompass a canopy as well. So that raises the question, since it is a structure and all of the other structures I think that are referenced in the definition require building permits, are we talking about having building permits required for tents and for canopies? And if they are required, and I see our building official nodding back there, what happens if a tent or a canopy is moved temporarily, for example, for a special event? Then do you need a new building? Place that tent or canopy. It also raised a question about the definition of building. Does that encompass either or both of the tents and canopies? You could think of a tent being an enclosure, and that's a key part of the definition for a building. But and it does have a roof of some sort. I don't think in the definition of building what type of roof is really defined. A tent could be an enclosure, but a canopy probably isn't, because you're not actually physically enclosing any walls around under a canopy. So those are just some things I would like that P&Z would think through to see if there's a need to adjust some of the definitions that we have already in our code or that we include in this new definition for tents. And then a final thing, when we talked about this before, we talked about non-conforming properties. And the interpretation that I was getting was that the only way for a non-conforming property to be able to erect either a canopy or a tent was to go to the Board of Adjustment and do so. As I read through the code, and I'm looking specifically now at section 185-60, which is extension of non-conforming use or buildings, not clear to me that putting a cover over an area that already exists as an outside service area, that's either an extension or an addition. So I'm not sure why they would have to go to the Board of Adjustment. I also would like P&Z to think through a little bit. In 185-60, we talked both about extension as well as expansion. And I think those are probably synonymous in that section, but why are we using two different words to say the same thing? So I think there could be some clarification there. So those are some issues that I think we really should take a look at. There's one other section too, and that is in table 3 of the town code. There are certain special exceptions that the Board of Adjustment can make, one of which is regarding a tent. And one of the provisions there is Well, I guess the basic question is, do we even need that section? And I think that's, again, something that, P and Z could look at as well and make some recommendations to us. If we make some changes here and we allow tents or canopies over outside service areas, do we even need this section? Is there anybody who would be putting up a tent that wouldn't be a temporary structure that we could just handle at the commissioner level without going through the Board of Adjustment? I think that's it. Those are some of the concerns that I had, and I hope that P and Z can take a look at that as we go forward. And I raise these, let me be clear, I raise these not because I'm trying to put roadblocks to putting up canopies or tents. I would just like to be clear and consistent. I want to make sure that we're able to do this. I think either a tent or a canopy is a good thing for the public. I think it helps people enjoy these outside service areas in a much more beneficial way for them. So I just want to make sure that we do this clearly and consistently, and that we create equal opportunities for businesses to do this.
With that being said, Gary, I did receive your email concerning, it seemed as if we're going to define tent separately, then maybe tent is not part of a structure, as I read through your email. But again, these are with the email that you sent and these points that have also been sent to Jim Dedes and Dawn Hanks with this possible change to collectively go to planning and zoning for their review.
Right.
I think it's a good idea. So with that being said, do I have a motion?
Motion to refer this
Second.
to P and Z, and including Gary's comments.
Would you like Gary's comments?
Yes, second.
Second. Any other discussion? Not seeing any. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Number 2, discuss and possibly vote to refer to the Planning and Zoning Commission an ordinance to amend 185-25 of the municipal code of the town of Dewey Beach to permit tents over outside service areas in the RB district.
Just do the same thing, refer this to P and Z, take it all up at once.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Any other conversation? Not seeing any. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All right, moving on to number 3. Discuss and possibly vote to approve a site plan for a proposed mixed-use structure at 1603 Coastal Highway, formerly referred to as map 334-20.18-75.00. With that, I think we have some representatives here who'd like to present. My thought process is to have them present, and then if there is anyone here for public comment, to come forth, and then for the commissioners to discuss.
And my name is Stephen Spence. I'm an attorney here in Sussex County, and I have the pleasure of representing Grotto Pizza and its affiliates in connection with a number of things, including this proposal for taking down the existing Grotto Pizza restaurant that's been, I think, on the site. I think we decided since 1983 or thereabouts, and maybe even another structure that was even there before that. But and to, as you know, you've already given us conditional use approval to build a new restaurant across the street, and so this is a reuse of a portion of the. It's a 15,000 square foot parcel. The company owns 2 other parcels that are zoned RR. They're behind this, which are currently used as support locations for deliveries and parking for the existing restaurant. Those other 2 parcels are not involved, and they have different zoning. The only parcel we're trying to get site plan approval for is the 15,000 square foot area. And the town building official has seen the very detailed plans and specifications and site plan for this project, which were done in a collaborative way with Pannoni Associates and an architectural firm who we have 2 representatives here from, who can answer any questions that might come up if the commissioners have any as to that. The principal purpose of this request is section 185-75 of the Dewey Beach Code contemplates that the commissioners should approve site plans for certain types of projects, including mixed-use projects, or in some cases, multi-family, multi-unit structures for residential use. But in any event, it doesn't contemplate, I don't think, that there be any requirement for a public hearing in the traditional sense of a zoning change, but it does contemplate that the commissioners approve the site plan. The requirements for submitting preliminary site plan are very extensive. I believe they've been complied with in this context. The sheer number of pages and size of the materials that have been submitted are a little daunting unless you are an engineer or a building official or an architect, but it's extensive and well done. And there is a section of the front of the property that'll look like, you'll be able to see it from Highway 1 that Mr. Gosnell has brought with him. And then the other drawing that's there is this. Basically, it's been submitted to the town and the required number of copies. And ultimately, the site plan, once approved, needs to be recorded in land records for Sussex County. So ultimately, if the commissioners do approve it, there is a signature block that we would have to ask the town to sign so that we can actually go record the plan as part of our building permit process. The project is for 4 townhouse units that I think will likely be in a condominium regime, because that's essentially what you have to do. 4 commercial spaces that would each have entrances off of Highway 1. And there is some commercial storage space that is accessible from the rear, back in the parking lot area. The primary parking requirements are met for the townhouse units in terms of the number of spaces that have to be supplied. And unless you have other specific questions about it, I think the building official, if she wants to, could make a record of their review process. I believe it's been through a thorough review process. But we wanted to open the floor for any questions that you might want to ask either the architects, myself, or Mr. Gosnell. If you had any questions, otherwise we'd ultimately hope for a vote in favor of approval of the site plan so that we can continue on with development of the project.
I just have a few questions, and I'll ask the commissioners. The parking that is depicted on the first page that you see there, is that only for the residents, or does that include for the business use condos on the bottom?
Jeff, do you want?
On the page here, it's 12 parking spaces.
Correct.
Yep.
Each one of
So,
the townhouse units.
I don't know if he can be heard.
Oh, you want to come up? Yeah, I'm sorry. Thanks. Feel free to come up. Here, I'll get away out of the way.
So currently, we need 3 spaces for each townhouse unit. We do have 12 spaces in the back, but then we also have garage. Each one of these
Correct.
townhouses has a garage. So technically, it's 4 spaces that we have. Well, there's 16 spaces, 16 parking spaces, if you want to look at it that way. We don't intend to have it for the commercial space, but we only need 3 for each one of the townhouse units. So what we're going to do is designate the ones for the townhouse, and there would actually be 4 open spaces at that point in time, whether it's for visitors to the townhouse units or whether it's for commercial. We won't go into designate it to anything specific.
Okay, I was just curious. So in the end, there will be 8 units that will be sold, or will it be 4 units sold?
4 townhouse units, so 4 units on the 2nd and 3rd floor. Ground floor would be 4 retail stores.
That would be retained by,
Yes, we're going to,
Okay.
actually, we plan on retaining everything right now. We are going to condo everything if we want to in the future sell any parts of it. But our goal right now is that we plan on retaining it for now. But we could sell, but we won't sell the downstairs. We won't sell the.
yeah, I guess I was trying to parallel my mind to this as an Izzy Plaza, where each one is a different unit
Oh.
versus the Wilson Building, which I think we're across the street where Woody's to Go is, where there's a townhouse up top that owns the what's underneath that.
Oh, yeah, no, this is not that way. This is not.
So
that
there'll
way.
be 8
Yes.
separate, that's going to be
Yes.
4 residents and,
Correct.
okay, all right.
I had one question. Is the egress for the townhouses in the rear or in the front?
The rear.
It's in the rear. Okay, and I don't know anything about like spacing and whatnot, but I assume it's all the proper spacing for the fire lane and the townhouse and whatnot. Otherwise
It's
it
already
couldn't
gone
get
through
approved.
fire marshal review. Correct.
Yeah,
We've already have our approval.
okay.
And is there a gate? Do I see a gate in the drawing?
No. There's no
An
gate.
access gate? No.
To the parking garage, parking lot in the back?
No, there won't be an access gate
No.
there. No.
Because G5 is maybe it's just a stop bar as a line as opposed to a gate bar.
Yeah, I see what you're looking at.
G5.
Probably that is that black.
It's a 4-inch yellow solid demarcation line.
It's just a line.
Yeah, it's a
Okay,
line, yeah.
thank you.
It's paint, basically.
Yes.
Paint.
Proposed stop bar is what it.
Okay.
what's
It's not a
defined as.
gate though.
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. The parking calculations, I was a little confused about. If you have only 4 bedrooms, that only requires 2 parking spaces. Were you counting the den that's in each unit as a bedroom?
I thought we needed 3. I thought it was 2 for 3 and then
It's
4.
2 for the first 4. I mean, I believe that's what's in the bulk standards table, that's what we changed the code to.
Oh, okay.
But the question is, if you look at the floor layout, there is a den.
Yes.
Which looks exactly like bedroom 4, so I would seem that might actually require a 3rd parking space.
Well, we don't plan on using, I mean, that is an upstairs den. I mean, that is the whole part. That's why it goes out onto the patio upstairs. There's a porch out there, so we do
But
have
it
it.
looks exactly like bedroom 4, it has the same access to
Sure.
the bathroom that's there as well, so.
I mean, we have
I
the
mean,
parking
that's something-
counted as that. I mean, it
Okay,
really
that's
wouldn't
fine.
matter to us either way.
That's
We
fine.
plan on designing them as a den. I mean, that's the way that we plan on doing it. But, you know, we could do it. I mean, we have the calculations either way to do it.
Earlier, there is for each unit, a resident garage on the first floor. But according to the code, the first floor is supposed to be 100% commercial. So is that really consistent with, with our current town code? Kind of looking back at the building official on that.
Fisher Architecture a number of months ago, so forth. So that particular back area, if you look at the particular plans, and I don't know what the sheet number is, you see the location where on the ground floor, they have it outlined for the commercial space. There's 4 commercial space units and it's outlined. Then outside of that would be the open garage slide-in area for those particular upstairs residents, and if that's the way I remember it. So it's not necessarily an enclosed garage, but it is a parking space area for the residents up above. And so within that, I guess technically they're calling it a garage as being their parking area space. So within,
It looks like it's under the residential unit, and it looks like it is enclosed. From what I can tell, there's a separate
it
door
does have.
access to each of
Okay,
them.
I stand corrected, I'm sorry, I did not realize that. Totally set. Space.
But it is on the ground floor, that's the point. So that's not consistent with the code. But the ground floor has to be 100% commercial. That's just what the code says.
Well, that is true. At this moment, I have not looked at it in that direction. If that's something that you folks feel needs to be applied, then that would be the direction I would go.
No, it's not whether we feel, it's whether that's what the code requires. I want them to do whatever the code is required.
So,
You know,
so
we're
it-
not-
it's raising
Yeah.
an interpretation question of whether a
Right.
garage would constitute a residential use that's prohibited on the first floor. I don't think we've had that question or an application quite like this in some time. Mr. Spence, I think, is anxious to speak to it. While you're doing that, Mr. Spence, looking at these requirements, it seems that what's contemplated for the commissioners is that there be a preliminary site plan approval and then a final site plan approval with any notes that are required or any conditions that are required. My feeling is we might have to come back. I don't know if there are any state agency approvals I don't know if you've given that any thought, because it seems that there's a reference to a preliminary approval process and then a final, both by the commissioners.
Do you want to address?
Whenever
Am I free to go?
No?
Don, I have a question while you're up there, though.
Yes.
So in sort of going through this, it looks like it's meeting code all along the line. Have you found any inconsistencies that we need to be,
Setbacks were appropriate.
setbacks are
Any sort
good?
of awnings and so forth, everything was within the building restriction line, setbacks and so forth. The parking requirements, when I've looked at those, do seem to apply or comply with section 185-35A1, where for the residential parking, 2 spaces are allocated for the first 3 bedrooms, plus 1 additional space per additional bedroom. So that's
That's
the,
not the current code.
Well, that's what 185-35 says, but we do have a history, unfortunately, of,
We fixed that. Point. So it was consistent with the bulk standards.
It was
had-
supposed to have been codified by now. I don't know
Yeah.
why it wouldn't be on the website.
it's not on the website that way.
Well, Mr.
I know
Dedes?
we were trying to clear that up.
Yeah.
So, and the way we meant to do it was the lesser parking requirement. Is that what we went with? I'm sorry, I don't
Yeah, it
remember.
was. It was the lesser requirement.
Okay, all right. Well, there's probably some legislative history there that we can figure out, and looks like it's going to benefit the applicant.
Hey, Jim, we can't hear you.
You're on mute. It's a good thing he's cursing.
Son of a gun. Okay. We've had a history of not including parking as part of commercial or residential. For example, and I'm going to just throw this out, if you look at Izzy Plaza, somebody brought that up, the condo units have parking on the ground level. So consequently, you can't, it's not all commercial space. So we've interpreted that you can have part of the ground space as commercial space when it comes to parking, whether you use it for parking or not. We just
But
look at it as a neutral, it's like a neutral area.
Are those parking spaces enclosed garages?
No, not in Izzy Plaza.
not in
Yeah, I
this
didn't think so.
Yeah, that's the distinction.
Yeah.
Well, the easiest thing would be is not to enclose them, but that, I haven't looked at it in that kind of detail, and I don't believe Dawn has either. Until we get to the details of the preliminary site plan being passed on over to the planning commission.
No planning commission
All right,
involved.
so I mean, the issue that we have here that Commissioner Persinger brings up is the fact that you cannot have a closed-in garage. Is that correct, sir?
Well, it's just that 100% of the first floor space is supposed to be commercial. That's the only, the code doesn't provide any other guidance.
Let me-
If this is part of the first floor, it just seems to violate that.
Let me ask a question. Does
That's part of the
anyone
code.
see any other problems besides this one that you pointed out?
I had another question. I don't know if it's a problem, but I have a question.
I had a path forward, I had an idea for a path forward, but if you have other issues, we need to get those out. That's kind of what I was
Do
thinking.
you want me to go ahead with my other question?
Yes, sir.
Okay. This building is in a flood zone. What's the flood zone rating there? I think it's AE6 or AE5, but it looks like it's probably 6.
Go ahead, feel free. Yeah, come on.
Heather Morrison with Fisher Architecture. We actually straddle AE5 and AE6. We're taking advantage of the floodproofing up to 1 foot above, so we're floodproofing up to elevation 7. Our actual elevation is going to be very close to the sidewalk grade so that we don't have steps and ramps going up to everything. So we're going to be about 425 for our floor level and then floodproofing up to 7.
Okay, because that doesn't show in any of the drawings that I could see.
Okay.
Certainly not in the concept drawing that was, the nice picture of the
It
front.
should, because that's what we did.
It just looks like the entrances to the commercial space are right at ground level.
And they are.
And how
They're-
is that built?
They're
How is
at
that-
level 425, which is almost adjacent to what the sidewalks are. The sidewalks are about 425, and we're floodproofing up to elevation 7.
I'm not following.
What do you,
Yeah.
flood roofing?
The floodproofing is like a membrane that we're putting on there to floodproof and to make a boat, basically, up to elevation 7.
Okay, elevation 7, but doesn't that apply to the front of the building as well as the back?
It's the whole thing. We're going to put shields in front of the doors. They'll be stored in the back in a storage area so that
Oh, okay, so
if a
that's what you're
flood
doing.
or severe weather is coming, someone will come and put the shields in front of the doors. To protect
And
the
what
building.
about the rear where you've got commercial space back there, storage space, as well as
Same
the
thing.
question about the garages?
Same thing. They're gonna
So
have to put
any
the
entrances or doors, there would have to be shields placed in front of those as well?
Yes, yeah. And we researched that to make sure that the garage doors, there's something that's capable of being put in place to withstand that large of an opening.
Okay. Was there any consideration given to elevating the property?
There was, but it would put lots of stairs and ramps in the front. It's not as welcoming to patrons, so we wanted to try and get it right at grade if possible.
Okay.
Idea for a path forward. And Fred, you tell me if this is acceptable. It sounds like the only big material thing that we've got is this issue of the garages and the fact that garages are enclosed. So what I'm thinking we could potentially do is we could vote to approve the site plan with the modification that the garages are not enclosed. The residential garages, that is, because the commercial ones certainly could be. And also in that, say that if they get a variance to have the garages enclosed, that the site plan is also approved with the variance for enclosed garages. I don't know if we're allowed to vote that way. Fred, it seems like a path forward that gives them some flexibility.
Well, if the Board of Adjustment is involved, they can change the law applicable to this project without regard to you making any reference to that in your motion.
Okay.
There may be an opportunity or requirement that this come back to us for final site plan approval. I think Mr. Spence was going to speak to that, but that's the way it appears to me, which would give them a chance to alter their plan if they choose to, or persuade us to believe that having an enclosed garage doesn't violate the residential use prohibition on the first floor. It might be that a number of mixed-use properties in town have closed parking or garage areas that serve them. I don't know if we've interpreted that. Apparently, Ms. Hinks hasn't been confronted with that yet, which is not surprising. She hasn't been with us that long, and this is a bigger project than we've seen recently. So it is raising a question we need to work on. Mm-hmm.
But to Commissioner Jasinski's point, if a motion was made with that caveat, we could move. Spence, do you want to comment?
Yes, I'm sorry. Client is willing to revise the plans not to have any garage doors for the residential use. The advocate in me suggests that the concept, I think, in the code is that if you're going to have conditioned space on the first floor, that it can't be residential space. And I don't know why a garage would necessarily cause us to be running afoul of the requirement that the first floor be commercial space, because it's not conditioned space, it's going to be a garage. So but if my client's willing to accept the idea that they're just not going to have garage doors on these and let that be the case with respect to the approval of this site plan, we could certainly do that if that's what you want. The second view is that one could also later ask that the town consider amending the site plan to allow us to do that after we've had the opportunity to present some argument on the subject without wasting a lot of your time now. On the preliminary and final site plan, I admit that our code is not very clear, one way or the other, as to whether there's supposed to be 2 votes or 1. I've gone through that a couple times myself, and I don't want to disagree with council so much as, and it's nobody's fault, but I don't want to point any fingers at anybody. These plans were all submitted and they had been generally reviewed and modified at the request of the town, the building official. And it was sort of late in the process where, in fairness to her, she discovered that site plan review and approval was even required. So we've been working on this for 6 months now. And to the extent that we can get to the point of having something final done, I don't think the town building official thinks that any additional changes are needed. And we would certainly agree to the condition in the context of what a site plan review is for the town commissioners, that there not be any garage doors on the residential units. But I'm not sure there's really anything else to do to amend the plan to seek and obtain your approval. So to the extent that we could get to the point of having this process end with that condition, I think our client would like that, just to be able to move on with the next phase of things. But I hesitate to, without getting the code in front of me, and I apologize, I did not bring my code today. I always bring my code, and I didn't bring it today for the first time ever. I don't want to debate with council without having the code in front of me. So, but anyway, to the extent you think you could do it, I'd like to see you do it with that one condition.
Well, then, I'm fine making a motion that we approve it with no garage doors on the residential units.
I'll second that.
Any other discussion? Well, we didn't open up to anyone else in the public, so I apologize. Is there anyone here from the public that would like to make a comment? All right, not seeing any.
Anybody in the waiting room?
Okay.
So we also think that there's a citation to the required parking in the parking calculation that it might be to the old code. An example of something you'd want to change. Even though you're compliant, and you'd be compliant in either case, but you may want to change it anyway.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'll go look. I remember some history with this, but I couldn't find it in the code the other day when I was looking at it. So
There should be an ordinance that was passed just
yeah,
within the last
I'll
few
go
months.
look. I have some recollection of the same thing because I remember the inconsistency that was originally existed between the chart and the code.
Right.
But I couldn't find the answer, so I assumed that was right.
Bill, for what it's worth, Bill, I had talked to Ashley because when we did the larger change, like 2 or 3 years ago, and apparently it's just the people who codify it, which is like outside the town, who get it all mapped into this, are very behind.
Well,
But we did I'm sure we adopted the less restrictive
Less
standards.
restrictions, yes.
what I was about to say is that why don't we try to verify that on our own and perhaps ask the town to consider in its approval motion that we agree to the one condition that no garage doors, and if the code has been updated, that we have the right to change that, the footnote to indicate whatever the right interpretation of the code is, and when we submit our final.
Seems
Okay, I
reasonable.
can amend my motion that it's 2 spaces per 4-bedroom unit. Right? And that's basically amending my,
Okay.
All right, and
no
unless
garage
you have
doors.
anything else?
yes.
All right, thank you very much.
So that's
Thank you,
your
sir.
motion, I'll second.
Any other discussion? Second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Right, so I think that if we were requiring substantive changes today, then we would have a final plan approval. I think it's perhaps not likely that we need a final plan approval, given the review that was just done and the fact that we're not making
I don't
any
believe we need a
substantive.
final plan review, but I would ask that we also look at the code for the element that Commissioner Persing brought up in terms of the garage, to make sure that it's consistent with the intention of the original, or why the code, why it was even put in place.
Right.
To begin with.
Right.
It's not a burden, and we'll put that on our agenda in the future, but it has nothing to do with you guys going forward.
So I just make the plans, the one that we submit for signature, that we hope.
That works.
And those downstairs commercial units, to the extent that they don't exceed, I think it's 2,000 square feet, are not required to provide off-street parking. So if it was developed as one commercial space, then there would have to be a parking calculation done, I think.
I agree.
Okay.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
As designed, there are 4 separate spaces, and they're all less, each space is less than 2,000 square feet.
Great. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Number 5, discuss possible vote to add 1 new member to the Climate Change Committee. Commissioner Persiker.
There was a new member who was identified by Chairman Dave Davis, and that is Sally Silver. There's a brief resume, I believe, that's posted. She graduated from Westchester University with a BS degree in geology, attended geology graduate program at the University of Delaware. Worked as consultant, Chester County Economic Development Council in southeastern Pennsylvania to facilitate development of emerging green markets in solar, wind, geothermal power, and energy efficiency. In her capacity as a consultant, she routinely brought public and private sector individuals together to discuss, plan, and execute strategies for building green markets. So I would move that we add Sally Silver to the membership of the Climate Change Committee.
Second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. David, did I hear you?
I said aye.
Okay, that passes unanimously. Number 6 on the agenda, discuss possibly vote to approve the purchase of a maintenance vehicle in the amount of $35,000 from the capital expenditure budget to replace the existing 2010 Ford Econoline van. Town manager.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor. The van was deemed unsafe. It's been used since 2010, first by the police department, then by code enforcement, and last by our maintenance folks. Time for us to purchase another vehicle. We thought that vehicle would last at least another 1 or 2 years, but having it serviced, the evaluation that was done said, no, it should not move, basically what they call a deadline. It's unsafe to operate at this time. So what we're looking at is something like a Transit Connect, which is a small van, as you can see up there on the screen. And the reason we're looking at a smaller type of vehicle than a large, because everything from Dagsworthy Street north are small streets. And for our building folks and our maintenance folks that go out on those streets during the summer, when they're going down those streets and they have to turn the vehicle around, even in our 250 truck, it's huge to do that. And this van will enable us to do that and be able to get up and down the streets a little better. It isn't an EV, and right now, given the fact that we don't have a charging station in town, we are currently looking at building a police station and a new town hall. And then some of the effects of salt water with EVs that are still under review, I think we need to stay with a gasoline-powered vehicle for right now.
Okay. Commissioner, any questions or comments for the town manager? The only question I have is $35,000 enough?
Well, the prices that I've looked at are anywhere between 32 and 34, so I went to 35.
And will that include, lettering and everything else?
That doesn't include like the lettering on the side. It
Okay.
doesn't.
I don't have any other questions. You have a motion?
Motion.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
The number 7 on the, as you said, was to discuss the relocation plan of existing 5G poles currently located on the dunes. As you all know, this continues to come back and forth in the news as well as in conversation. I had spoke with council. This is not a necessarily commissioner issue anymore because it is an administrative issue in terms of following the ordinance that has been passed. We've done everything that we can possibly do without going against the ordinance that we've already written. But I'd ask that we get a kind of an update from the conversations that you had recently with either of you, conversations with CTC and Verizon.
Yeah, so both council and Assistant Town Manager Jim Dedes have been working very hard with both Verizon and CTC. At this time, we are waiting for Verizon to provide us with some additional information to both CTC to evaluate and for the town to review. And with that, I'll turn it over to Jim Dedes if you have any other comment.
Come on, Jim.
Apologize. I've had several conversations with their government liaison, Bob McGuckin, and I believe everyone's trying as hard as they can to get this resolved as quickly as possible. There have been some stumbling blocks, and part of it has to do with what they interpret as proprietary information in releasing certain RF signal data on what their communications equipment is capable of doing. We are happy, and I think our town solicitor can comment on his conversation with our town attorney, but we felt at this point that the town would honor whatever proprietary information there would be so that we could go ahead and move forward as quickly as possible. As you know, that there are four areas that there actually there are three areas. One deals with our desire to get it on Route 1, the equipment. Two was to co-locate, and I believe there's a problem with that from Delmarva's Power's perspective, that if there are power lines or there's equipment already set up, they have a prohibition against entering it. When I talked to James Crane from CTC, he said that they had some verification from the Verizon that they have statements from Delmarva Power restricting certain areas where they can put co-location on. The third is on a commercial building, and I'm not aware of this. They're looking at, CTC is looking at a statement made by Verizon that the FEC regulations state that we cannot require a utility company such as Verizon and 5G to move from a public area to a private area. And so the last hurdle is us agreeing to where we could put it if we all come to an agreement. And I think we don't have any major objections, and there may be some slight variances that the town manager could certainly approve them on. But that's where we are right now, and I believe our town solicitor had a discussion with their attorney representing them.
Well, I can just add that I've had a number of exchanges, pleasant exchanges with their in-house counsel. I think they are sincerely committed to cooperating with the agreement, the stipulation they had reached, and it's just a question of satisfying CTC with sufficient information. I think there is a path forward. I think we may have had a breakthrough here recently, but as far as we're concerned, we, of course, don't have in-house the technical expertise to evaluate these representations that are made about where appropriate locations for these devices are and aren't. So we're relying on CTC. I think CTC may come into possession of some additional information that will enable them to evaluate the position taken by Verizon, and hopefully we'll see progress here in the coming 30, 60, 90 days.
So I guess my question is, with all the places that they either say they don't have to do or they can't do because of Delmarva Power and whatnot, have they given us a proposed location for each of these poles that meets from their perspective?
So there was a stipulated agreement as to the relocating of those poles that did not involve the town, as you know, because it came it was an outcome of litigation that was ongoing. So we are aware of alternate locations that are acceptable to them.
Okay.
But in order to establish to our satisfaction that our preferred locations are not suitable, we're looking to CTC to tell us why that is so.
Right. Okay.
But in summary, you feel confident based upon this new information that will be provided to CTC on a confidential basis that we will be able to move forward and get these poles moved off the dunes.
I think so. Mhm.
Okay.
I'm confident.
Any other questions, commissioners? Okay.
Just one comment. So at some point, is there a non-disclosure signed by CTC and Verizon?
It won't be I don't believe it's going to come to that.
Okay.
I don't think it'll be as formal.
I think if it has to come to that, that's where, either you'll sign the NDA, just give us the information, and there you go. Satisfied everybody's curiosity.
With that being said, we'll move to the review of November financials. We've all received them online as well as they're here at Town Hall. I don't have any specific questions on them. Does any of the commissioners?
Talking just about the monthly or the projections that we received as well?
Monthly now, but if you want to, you can feel free to talk about the projections going forward.
Okay. I don't have any comments on the monthly report, but I first of all want to thank Sheena for the time she spent fulfilling the request that I made at the last meeting to get some projections for where we're going to be at the end of the year. I think it's important to have that because we're now moving into the budget season. Budget and Finance, I think, is going to be meeting next month.
Next month.
And I think this provides them with a good baseline. It's also a little bit sobering because I think we're beginning to see some of the effects of changing economic conditions, a slowdown in transfer tax rates. We're still running a bit behind on things like business licenses and rental licenses, and I think we need to spend a little more time sorting some of that out. Some of that is because we made a change in the date by which those licenses are required this past year. And so that changed the crediting of some of the payments. But I think we're going to pick up some of that at the end of the year because I think people, even though we've moved the dates back into the next fiscal year, I think some people will still continue to pay early and we'll be able to recognize some of that revenue. That's a guess at this point. I honestly do not have a clue what we do about transfer taxes. I don't know how to project them. I think we're just going to have to be very careful in our next budget year as we go forward. It looks like we're going to be a little short. It looks like we're going to be a little short on hotel tax, which also surprises me a little bit. But I think December will tell us a lot. I think we need to revisit this for the next meeting and just see where we are, and hopefully we'll be able to revise some of these figures. On balance overall, I think, and correct me if you disagree, Sheena, but I think that we're going to come in somewhere around in balance, with revenues equaling expenditures for those things that we budget. There were some additional expenditures that show up on our profit and loss statements, things like expenditures from the infrastructure account or from now the capital expenditure account. That really doesn't draw down what we budgeted for. It really doesn't count against us. So again, for what we budgeted for, the normal activities, I think we're going to be in pretty good shape this year, at least breaking even. We're not going to have the kind of surplus we saw last year, but we may see a little surplus, hopefully.
Yeah, Commissioner, I agree. And I've also communicated to Sheena there's a few things that are currently in the financial statements in the detail that I believe should not or may not be actually part of our P&L, but are our capitalized assets that will be moved off. I think that will be fine. I also agree with you that when we get into this budget season, we need to take into consideration the reduction in the transfer tax, offsetting a little bit of the increase the hotel tax was alluded to earlier, and also additions to both, as Captain Fritchman and Lieutenant Hocker from both the Beach Patrol and Police Department, to look at the salaries and salary requirements we have in the upcoming year. So all of those things put together with hopefully also a capital improvement plan or streets and infrastructure plan can allow us to effectively look at the set-asides and what's being directed to the set-asides and where our targets of those should be. So we've got some work to do. Any other comments on the financials?
It's one of those things we knew transfer tax was eventually going to catch up at some point. We've had a lot of great years and put money away for, that rainy day. We're not going to hit a rainy day now, but I think we need to plan well for next year. Try to maybe come up with some new revenue streams, and that's one of the conversations we're having at the budget and finance. So, some ideas I'm going to come back and present.
Wonderful. Okay. With that, comments, Town Manager.
Yeah, real quick, Kate, if you could bring up that slide. So we continue to work on the end of the streets. Want to go ahead and bring this up. So on Carolina Dagworthy, New Orleans Street, go ahead to the next slide. So this is what Carolina Street looks like right now after we've finished the project down there. So we're going to be looking for somebody to donate another bike rack down at that end. We get a lot of bicycle traffic down on Chesapeake and Carolina, but this is what there. And Don did a very good job working this. Next slide, please. This is what you see out front. We've been working on trying to straighten this out a little bit. This is as the work. So Don did the best he can to get everything back in shape there. Next slide, please. And then over on New Orleans Street, the Crown, the second block, continues to have water days after the rain, as you can see there. So I've gotten 2 estimates so far to raise the Crown about 2 inches on that road to get the water to go down to the storm drains. And I'm looking for one more, and we're looking to use CTF funding for that project. Nothing from the town, that would come from the state, but I got to have 3 estimates to move forward with it. I just wanted to kind of update you on those projects.
Great. Any questions for Town Manager? Lieutenant Hocker.
I actually have a presentation today. So on October 1st of this year, Laura Ashby coordinated the Dave's Dewey Dash 5K run in the memory of her son. Funds generated from this event, along with assistance from a nonprofit called Simon's Heart that brings awareness to sudden cardiac arrest of her youth. Ms. Ashby was able to donate 3 new AED units, automated external defibrillators, that we could deploy out on the street in our police cars. We currently have numerous AEDs, but they're ending basically they're at the end of their life. They need servicing. I actually had a meeting not long ago with our representative who said we needed to start investing in some new ones. Out of nowhere, Mrs. Ashby contacted me and said we'd like to, coordinate a donation to the police department. Couldn't happen at a better time. She was able to provide us with 3 of these AEDs, saving us probably around $4,000 to $5,000. I wanted to have Ms. Ashby here to give her a presentation and recognize her for her generous donation to our department. Provide her with a certificate as a certificate of appreciation for helping us in our mission to provide the service to our community. Come on up.
I actually have some good news for you. A check from Races to Run just cleared, and we have enough for 2 more.
That's fantastic.
Wonderful.
That's great. It saves us several $1,000s.
That's
to
wonderful.
provide this. And, to keep these going, they sit in the back of police cars in and out of the weather. They're there to help out if the paramedics and ambulance can't get there, and we have to provide service. So these definitely do give us a little safety net for those who are, out on the streets. So
That's so nice of you. Thank you so
certificate of
much.
appreciation says, certificate of appreciation awarded to Laura Ashby for assisting the Dewey Beach Police Department in its mission to serve our community, dated December 16th, 2022.
Thank you very much. And this year's race is September 30th, and we plan to continue to do this. This is going to be our equipment and training on an ongoing basis. So if you have more of a need or that lifeguards. And the other thing I wanted to just ask is if there's any way you
They want to do some pictures. Come back, stand. Smile in the background, sir.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Laura.
One of our passions.
That's cool.
I was going to bring you one. They say, you stay classy, dude. I was born on Halloween and he dressed up like Will Ferrell and man character. So instead of San Francisco or whatever, or San Diego, I do. But,
Right.
We had
Stay classy, dude.
Oh, nice.
I forgot it. Next time.
No problem.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you, Laura.
Thank you.
Lieutenant, anything else?
Just to announce that our grants are coming in. I've received another grant for overtime to combat violent crime a few weeks ago. Another $6,500 to help out with the problems that we have in the summertime, bringing the total to around $17,000 worth of funds for overtime to put extra police on the street. Also received funding to purchase 3 ballistic shields, one which is rifle rated, a little bit heavier duty than the normal body armor that you wear. 2 others are leveled down from that just for patrol side, but if the officers come into a situation where they're dealing with high caliber rifle rounds or whatnot, they have something to help them protect themselves. So we received those this month along with the funds for the overtime.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir. Commissioner Barrett.
No comments.
Commissioner Gibbings.
No comments.
Commissioner Jazinski.
None comments.
Commissioner Persinger.
No comments.
I will make just very brief comments, and that is that as town manager alluded to, this Sunday we do have the lighting of the menorah on the Baywalk, upcoming event. Our next meeting, due to a few conflicts, if everyone works for everyone's schedule, will be January 13th here at the Life Saving Station. We also now, Dewey Beach will be hosting the Association Coastal Town monthly meetings, and that will be February 2nd, also here at the Life Saving Station. Reminder to the town public that we're still seeking historical old pictures, and I will be leaning on the Gazette because I know that they have them also. And the last thing is that we had the Southern Delaware Tourism Awards this past week at the Hyatt. And one thing that remind me is that Sussex generates $2.3 billion in visitor spend, so on an annual basis. So what we do in Little Dewey Beach, as well as what we do in the neighboring towns, really means a lot to the state of Delaware. So much so that the tax that the state receives, or the funds the state receives on various transaction, reduces each household's taxable property tax by over $1,500. So the beach towns are important, that's for sure. With that, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Motion.
And second, all in favor? Aye.